Now, your calls on scrapping the two-child benefit cap. Is it something the government must do? Can the country afford it? Can we afford it? Charities have written to Sir Keir Starmer to argue that scrapping the rule that you can only claim the child element of universal credit for your first two children would be the most cost-effective way to reduce child poverty. The Child Poverty Action Group says 4.5 million children are living in relative poverty now, meaning their parents earn 60% less than the average family. This can lead to children missing out on school trips, living in cramped or damp homes and going without a warm winter coat. But the charity says ending the two-child limit on benefits would lift 350,000 children out of poverty overnight, and a further 700,000 kids would have their lives improved. It's reported government ministers have said in private they won't scrap the limit. But, Bobby, these are decisions that all of us have to make. How many children we have is a key decision. How many kids you can afford was definitely a conversation I had with my missus. Why shouldn't people on benefits have to make those choices too?
So again, as a school teacher for more than a decade, I understand, having children is a very complex decision. But ultimately, I always think you judge a society by how they treat the most vulnerable and the most disadvantaged. And children, they don't choose to come into this world. They are in this world. So as a society, we should make sure that we support them. And again, lifting the two-child benefit actually is probably one of the most cost-effective ways of actually reducing poverty. And I know there'll be people who are saying that the economic side, the country can't afford it, and these families should, they should think about that before they have children. But actually, there are so many long-term costs of child poverty, because these children, again, as a teacher, I've seen, you've got increased healthcare needs because in poorer families, they're suffering. Their educational outputs go down, so therefore they're going to be a strain on the economy in terms of employment. And there's a higher chance of these children potentially committing crimes if they're not in families that are economically stable. So actually, I think while the child benefit cap being abolished will increase economic costs in terms of the policy itself, I think it will reduce long-term costs of the economy.
I mean, pushing those costs, of all the savings we're going to make, Dawn, preventing kids from getting the best possible start in life is maybe the one I'd put at the bottom of the list.
Well, I mean, I can see both sides to this argument. Obviously, it's, as you said, Bobby, children don't choose to come into the world. And, irrespective of how their parents behave, we shouldn't punish the children. However, the main line is, can we afford it? We're already making, £4.8 billion worth of benefit cuts at the moment. So where is this money going to come from for a start? And I do think that we have to encourage people to be responsible. I mean, if you can't afford to have children, Matt, as you just said, don't have them. Be responsible parents.
2017, when this came, so children after 2017 don't suffer these cuts. It doesn't apply to them. So parents had that knowledge at the point when these children were being born that this benefit wouldn't be available to them. So they can't say they didn't know, Bobby.
But one thing is circumstances change. So there may be two set of hard-working parents decide to have a third child because they can economically afford it, and in fact their savings suggest they can. But then their situations change. Someone could be ill, they could lose their employment. But also we've seen the country has had a harder economic time. So individuals and families have been impacted by that. So you may have made the decision with good faith in 2017 thinking I can afford it, but things have changed in 8 years.
But you would hope there would be other benefits to stop those families falling through the net and support them rather than using the child benefit cap. I mean, I think that it will encourage some feckless parents, shall we say, to maybe think, well, the state are going to pay for my children, I'll have as many as I want.
But I think with all sort of government policies, there'll always be someone looking to take advantage. So I would say don't punish the law-abiding majority for the minority that are going to take advantage.
OK, and you feel it's the children that suffer. I suppose the point here, Dawn, is, luck plays a part. Benefits are there in part to look after people when they have bad luck, of the type that Bobby's describing here.
Yes.
And just because some people might see that as an opportunity, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't look after those who have had misfortune.
Look, in an ideal world, of course we should. We should make sure that no children is living in poverty. But we don't live in an ideal world. The country's skint. We've heard even more worse financial news this morning, haven't we? We're making so many cuts in benefits. The money's got to come from somewhere. We're paying the highest tax we've paid for 70 years. it's got to come from somewhere. Something's got to give somewhere along the line. Okay. Where do we find the money to fund this?
OK, let's take some calls. Simon is in Hampshire. Simon, is this the right cut? Or, I mean, it's not a cut. It's what we have. Should it be scrapped and go back to where we were before 2017?
I think so, man. On balance, I've been listening to the program. I come down on the side of Dawn. I think she's talked a lot of sense, you know. Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, I haven't got time. Yeah, it should be scrapped because people will just have babies willy-nilly, you know, they don't have to pay for it. Why would they bother? It's that simple to me, you know. It sounds a bit harsh in the soundbite. I know there's some grey areas, but on balance, yes, it should be, you know.
I mean, is it that simple, though, Simon? Because you say people have children willy-nilly. They may have children based on what they can afford at the time, and circumstances change. So, you know, unless we're going to tell people there is a 2-child limit, you can't have more than 2 kids, they may think they can afford those kids at the point where they're conceived, when they come into the world. And actually, things change after that because people get ill, relationships break up, and people lose their jobs.
Yeah, sure. As I say, it's not a done deal. It's not a slam dunk answer to this. But I only have to watch programs on telly where you got 10 children and counting these. And I think, Jesus, you're joking, aren't you? 10 kids, and they just go down to the benefit office and collect £1,000 a week. Why should I have to pay for that? You know?
Is that the politics of?
It sounds harsh, but you know, I can see both sides. You know.
OK. Simon, is this what you expected when you knew a Labour government would come into power? That something like this wouldn't be repealed? A Tory policy to cut benefits in this way wouldn't be repealed?
I'm not too sure. I don't know who suggested it should be politically wise. I don't know if it was Labour or Tory. I'm not even thinking about that at the moment. So I don't know whose idea it was to get rid of to cap it. Tory or Labour, I don't know, you know.
Yeah, so, I mean, this was 2017, a Tory policy, Bobby. Did you naturally assume, maybe as we did with things like winter fuel payments as well, you know, we looked at those policies, they don't feel like what many of us might have expected from a Labour government?
Again, I voted for Labour at this particular election. And again, I'm someone, while I'm naturally left-leaning, I will vote for who I think is the best possible government for this occasion. And I thought, I thought they would show more compassion in their policies. And I understand when Rachel Reeves talks about economic conditions, Trump's tariffs have probably added a bit more turmoil to the economy. But ultimately, I think a Labour government should be about looking after people and supporting the most disadvantaged. And I feel like this policy of not scrapping it, or sort of keeping the Conservative 2017 policy, is slightly callous.
I mean, the answer that they've come up with is breakfast clubs, is something they've talked about, a policy which would help parents by allowing them kind of wraparound care so that they can bring the kids to school early.
I'm suspicious
and
about that
allows them to go work.
The breakfast clubs. I think that, because they've had a lot of rebellion on the Labour benches and from Labour MPs about this policy, haven't they? Rosie Duffel being one of the most vocal ones. And I think they've announced a breakfast club thing as a sweetener to keep Labour MPs who are very, anti the 2-child benefit limit. I think they've introduced the breakfast club to actually a little bit of a sweetener. We are doing something for poorer families, but basically this Labour government are more conservative than the Tories.
So why did you roll your eyes when Bobby said he voted Labour there? Because it sounds
because
like they're bringing in policies that you approve of.
What do you mean I approve of?
Well,
I'm living in the...
You wouldn't want to scrap the benefits.
I'm living in the real world. And this government have come in under the pretence of being a Labour government, and they're doing everything that you expect a Conservative government to do. I'm apolitical. I couldn't even tell you who I'd vote for these days. But I mean, they're coming and they hammer the pensioners with the winter fuel allowance. They're hammering our farmers with the inheritance tax. Now they're how many millions, billions in benefits cuts, and now we're hammering children. This isn't a Labour government. It's not the Labour government my dad supported as a union leader back in the day. He'd be turning in his grave at some of the stuff they're doing.
I mean, yeah, but they are Conservative policies.
Yeah.
As you say, they could be regarded
That's what I mean, if you voted for Labour...
they're maintaining Conservative policies. Are you disappointed, Bobby?
I am disappointed because, again, as someone that teaches in a state school in East London, when local residents voted Labour, they're expecting a government that would support people through, again, investment in our health, our education, reversing some policies from the Conservatives they thought perhaps were cruel towards the most disadvantaged. And again, I know in Labour, when they stand up on the benches, they were saying, oh, tough economic times. But I think making these decisions are short-sighted, because these children here that suffer economically will have, again, poorer health outcomes, poorer educational outcomes, more likely to commit crimes. And in 5-10 years, that will come back to bite us back in terms of economic. So it's a short-term policy, I think.
Let's take another call. Bridget's in Manchester. What do you reckon, Bridget? Do you think it would make sense to scrap the 2-child limit on benefits?
Good morning, Matt. No, I agree with the last caller, Simon. If you cannot afford any more than 2 children, it's up to you to support them.
OK, but you may believe that you can afford more than 2 children, 3, 4 children, when you have them, but then circumstances change.
Yes, that's true. But usually when you're working and you've got a certain income, you choose and you plan your children. There's no need now for anybody to want children. There's plenty of help out there for everybody.
I'd agree with you.
I had to do the same.
I would agree with you, Bridget, if we were living in the era of jobs for life, where you could look 10 or 20 years down the line and know exactly, I mean, to be honest, it was mythical anyway. It never really existed. But people's lives are changing all the time. We see technology taking over, pushing people out of jobs. You know, if you work on a checkout at a supermarket, your job might not be there next week because it's been replaced by a self-checkout. So when the world changes as quickly as it does, people's lives also change.
Yes, but I also think, I agree with you there, but I also think that people that are not working at the time they have the first baby just carry on and have more than 2 and then expect somebody else to support them.
Bridget,
that's my view.
The vast majority of people that receive benefits are working. So if we can't characterise people that receive benefits.
Well, I've worked all
working.
my life and I've never, ever had a benefit, ever.
I mean, I'm really happy for you, Bridget, but there are people who work and don't receive enough money to be able to look after their kids, and their circumstances have changed.
Yes, I couldn't take my children on certain days out because I couldn't afford it and I had to go to work. That meant I had to have somebody to mind them. My child minding happened while I was at work, and my husband, because we both worked on social hours. I was a nurse for 40-odd years, nights and days, and it was very, very difficult bringing up 3 children. But I never got any help from anybody, only my children's allowance, as they called it.
OK, I'm just wondering, Bobby, that with your experience in schools and what you see I mean, Bridget's experience and Bridget's life has followed a certain path. How diverse are the family setups that you have, the employment setups that they have, and the backgrounds that these kids are growing up in?
Yeah, I think what I've seen is, again, the last 11 years I've been in schools, is that economic conditions have become much more challenging. So when I started 11 years ago, you would see, again, my anecdotal evidence, but it probably is borne out by some research, a mum or one person working and maybe another person working half the time could support a family through thick and thin. Whereas now I've seen that there are more and more parents, both are working and still they're not able to make rent, not able to support children in terms of food and meals. So it's just, I think, with our caller, times are more difficult. And I appreciate she's done really well to get through life, but not everyone's as privileged as you, Bridget.
OK. Well, listen, Bridget, you may not see yourself as privileged, but it sounds like there are various different circumstances people find themselves in and really need some of those benefits. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Bridget. Don't forget later on.